And we are live.
And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can also log on to their website, se-ortho.com. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. You are Florida Gator fans coming off a loss to Georgia on Tuesday night. The Gators now 24-4. What are they? I guess 11-4 in the Southeastern Conference, I believe. Here's the bottom line. Not that I'm going to take a victory lap, Graham, because I don't like Florida losing. But I told you, man, either against LSU or Georgia, I thought they were going to have a stinker. And they didn't have a stinker on offense necessarily. They just decided not to play defense in the first half against Georgia. And look, when they took the lead with a minute to go, it would have been an epic collapse by the Dogs. Georgia outplayed Florida a majority of the night, probably deserved to win the game, and Georgia did win the game there in the final minute.
I just hate that it had to be them. If it
Yep.
was LSU, I'd be like, whatever.
Well, and my
But
thing too is I just assume lose that game by 30. You come all the way back, you take the lead, only to still lose. That was like a double sting.
Mike White did everything in his power to give it back to the Gators. Um, yeah, it was just frustrating, man. Again, you're right, and they were kind of due for a stinker and due for a bad game. And is this the end of the world? No, they'll be fine. But it has to be. Oh, I hate that it had to be Mike White and the freaking Georgia Bulldogs. They put Mike White's face on my television screen when I watch the game, and I just get angry. Um, so yeah, that it sucked to lose that game, but I agree with you. I mean, they weren't going to. I mean, this time last week when we talked about it, they weren't going to finish the rest of the season undefeated. Like they were going to lose again, and they ultimately did. You hope they really respond well tomorrow against A&M. You hope that they finish this out strong. I mean, between A&M, Auburn, and Ole Miss, I actually think they're going to go 3-0 out of those three.
A&M, Alabama, and Ole Miss.
Sorry. Yeah, that's sorry. I had the state of Alabama on the brain, but said the wrong team. Yes, A&M, Alabama, and Ole Miss. I actually think they're going to win all three. I think this loss to Georgia may have come at a good time to be just the appropriate kick in the ass they needed right before March.
Well, I mean that's the glass half full look at it. And I know that's what people say. It's a good loss. We'll find out, right? I mean, if they lose to A&M tomorrow, there's certainly going to be a different conversation. A&M is leaking water and then some. A&M is drastically worse now than they were 2 weeks ago. They are not a good basketball team right now. In fact, A&M just lost at home to Vanderbilt this past week. So Florida should take care of business. And look, if a number one seed is important to people, you know how I feel. A 1, 2, or a 3 seed. As long as you're a top 3 seed, I don't really care. I guess it'd be cool to be a number one seed. I'm not really sure how much it matters. But if that's important to you, that's still in play. Just win your next 3 games. If you win your next 3 games, you're going to be a number one seed because odds are you're competing with Alabama for one of those ones. And if you go into Tuscaloosa and beat them on their home floor, you'll be a 1 seed despite the loss to the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, you will be. I go back and forth on it. I would like to have a 1 seed. I think for the confidence going into the tournament, I think just the status is fun. But I mean, to your point, because there's not this year. I know Auburn's really good. I know Duke is really good. I know Florida's really good, and some of these other teams. But there's no UConn this year. There's no team like that that's just going to be a buzzsaw and is just going to murder every single team they play in the tournament, and nobody has a prayer to beat them. So that said, I mean, you're right. I mean, 2s and 3s win the national championship all the time, and that there's nothing wrong with that. My main concern now, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks. We've gone back and forth, and with each week, the status of everything kind of changes a little bit. My main thing that they need, regardless of seed, and this is where I'm at this point, Hack, is they just need to be healthy. You know, you could tell when they played Georgia, Alex Condon was just a little off. He played and he played well, and he's obviously really good. But like the play at the end where he got the steal, and it was honestly a bad foul call. The guy for Georgia did not foul him, but on that transition with a minute left or whatever it was, and he went up to dunk, and he got rejected by the rim. A fully healthy Alex Condon flushes that home, right? I have to believe his bounce may not quite be 100% where it normally is, and he might also just be a little bit rusty. He hasn't played in 2 weeks. So between Condon, between Elijah Martin, who seems to be good but probably just needs to continue to work back, between Micah Handlock and continuing to get his sea legs underneath him, Walter Clayton, I think, is healthy. He just had a terrible game. He didn't play. I know he had 18 points, but he didn't play well. I just need everybody healthy and ready to rock when it's time.
Well, and I need somebody to make a free throw. I mean, that was ridiculous. Look, and I get it, and I'm on social media during these games, and man, I'll probably get some grief for saying this, but it drives me nuts. I don't care if it's football or if it's basketball. Florida has never actually lost a game. It's always the referee's fault, right? Every single time
No,
Florida loses,
push back
it's
on you.
always the ref's fault.
No, I
No,
gotta push.
maybe not with you, but with some Gator fans, it drives me nuts. Make a free throw. You missed 11 free throws. By the way, Florida got to the line a bunch. What does that mean? Referees were calling fouls on Georgia. But unlike Georgia, the Dogs hit their free throws. Florida missed 11 free throws. Was completely ridiculous. It just absolutely drives me nuts.
I think we have to differentiate something here. This is where I got to push back on you. I think you can complain about the officiating and criticize them and point out what they did wrong without saying that's the only reason Florida lost the game, or that's even a reason Florida lost the game.
Because but it's every game. It's every time they lose. I don't care if it's football or basketball. And again, maybe it's not you, but you are on social media as much as I am. People watching, just watch your timeline and watch Gator fans. Football season, basketball season, when the Gators lose, inevitably on that timeline, it's going to be the official's fault. And it's at certain.
But that's what I'm saying. This is where I'm differentiating. I think you're seeing a lot of people complain about the officiating. Yes. Are all of those people saying this is why the Gators lost? Because I think those are two different things. Some people, sure, but there's those people in every fan base. I mean, Tennessee does that every game as well. Every fan base is going to have those blame the refs people. But again, I believe you should be allowed to tweet about or talk about or critique the officials and what you feel they did wrong. But like I thought the officials were really bad on Tuesday night. Do I think that's the reason the Gators lost the game? No, the Gators lost the game to your point. They lost the game because they missed a bunch of free throws. They lost the game because Walter Clayton had horrible turnovers, looked disinterested defensively. They lost the game because Alex Condon didn't look like his normal self. They lost the game because of a myriad. They lost the game because Georgia's high screen in the first 5-10 minutes of the game was killing them, and that allowed a lot of their shooters to get in a good rhythm, and then they couldn't miss. Those are the reasons they lost the game. That said, the officiating was still poor, especially in the second half. And it wasn't even all necessarily like against the Gators. It was just a bad officiating crew, just generally speaking. But they were stopping stuff for reviews. That Ruben Chinyelu goaltend, it wasn't even close to a goaltend.
Yeah.
But that's a point in the game where, Florida's getting some momentum. And even without – forget Florida's momentum. I'm just talking about like there's a good flow to the game. It's a good back and forth. That stuff stops the game.
Bless you.
I'm allergic to bad officiating.
About to say that was an incredible sneeze. I bet that felt good.
But like those there's way too many replays like that in college basketball, and I'm not just talking about the Florida Georgia game on Tuesday. I'm talking about generally speaking. Um, it stops the game. It makes the game flow herky jerky and tougher to watch. And I have a lot of critiques about the officials, as I think a lot of people do. That's not me saying that's why the Gators lost. We have to differentiate those two. Just because just because you're critiquing the officials doesn't mean you're saying that's why the Gators lost.
Well, let me ask you this. You talk about getting healthy. I can actually hold that thought real quick. Thank you to the continued support of Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. They've brought you Gator Bytes here for years and years and years. You can see the good doctor and hear the good doctor, Kevin Murphy, on Thursday mornings in the 7 o'clock hour with Jeff and Dan on the drill on 1010XL for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. I've been a patient at Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. My wife has been a patient at Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. And again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for their continued support here of the Gator Bites podcast. You talk about the Gators getting healthy. There's that old saying that, look, maybe you play above your head when guys are down. It's like the Patrick Ewing theory, I think it's what it's called. You could argue some of Florida's best games were recently when they were without Condon, Elijah Martin. They went into Auburn and won without Martin. Now they're getting reasonably healthy and they lose to Georgia. And I'll be really interested to see what happens against A&M because you got to figure out different rotations, right? With Hanlockton back in the fold, Condon back in the fold, Martin back in. You want to get Klobuchar some time because he's shooting it well. You got to solidify this rotation. We'll see what Sam Alexa's status is. I got to be honest. When he's healthy, I'm not sure he's going to find the floor in the tournament. You already got 4 bigs. But you got to solidify whatever your rotation is going to be in tournament time in these last 3 regular season games because they were so successful. But getting all these guys back, you just got to make sure that doesn't throw off the rhythm or the chemistry or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Club fandom first called me Grant. My name is Graham and said, "Have you played basketball?" He pushed Colin in the back. He had his arm there, but it really wasn't a push, man. It honestly.
Yeah, he did this. It really, yeah. I mean, I could have seen it both ways. I'm happy they called the foul, but I could have seen it both ways.
And to your point about the officials, like we were just talking about, if the shoe's on the other foot there, every Gator fan in America is saying that was not a foul. It really was not a push. And Sean replied right after Connor he really was a push. But anyways, yeah, Hag, that was kind of the next big thing I wanted to bring up, and you already got to it. That's my biggest concern going into March is once they are fully healthy, which they're getting there.
They're basically there. Again, nothing against Sam Alexis, but again, he's going to have a hard time finding the floor.
Yeah. So, but to your point, like you just said, you need to go into March. You need at least late March when you start playing March Madness games. You need to go into March Madness with a rotation that everyone knows and is comfortable with, and everyone needs to go into the game knowing kind of exactly what their role is, how many minutes they're going to play, that kind of thing. You know, obviously when people get in foul trouble and all that changes things, but for the most part, there needs to be a pretty clear idea of what that rotation is. Due to injury and due to guys off the bench playing really well and demanding more minutes, which is a good problem to have, their rotation's kind of all over the place right now. There's not really like here's the starting 5, no matter what, they're going to play this amount of minutes, and these other guys are going to sub in at this time, and they're going to play this amount of minutes. I mean, I think Thomas Houck has probably played his way out of 6th man of the year because he started so many games now.
Yeah, and he needs to. He's one of their best players.
I totally agree. But you see what I'm saying? Like, you know, Urban Klobuchar, how many minutes is he going to play? It feels like some games he plays a lot of minutes, some games he doesn't play quite as much. Denzel Aberdeen has been playing a lot lately. Against Georgia, he didn't play that much, and when he didn't make a huge impact because I think when you don't play as much and you don't get in that rhythm, it's hard to. And Hand Lockton, I think, is as he gets his sea legs under him, is playing more and more and more, which those minutes have to come from somewhere. That means some of the other bigs are playing less. Like, and Elijah Martin. I don't know that Elijah Martin has seamlessly gotten back into the fold yet. Like, he has had some games where he hadn't looked very good, and even games where maybe he's played well. It's other guys haven't looked quite as fluid. And
Real quick on Martin, I know he's 73% from the free throw line. At least that's what they said on Tuesday. I must miss the 73 that he makes out of 100, and I must only see the 27. That guy is a liability at the free throw line right now. I don't even want to watch him shoot free throws. It just irritates me.
yeah, well, he's also. I feel like when Elijah Martin gets the ball, I feel like the offensive flow slows down. Like I feel like part of the reason, and I still think he's a good player, but when he was out and Aberdeen's playing more minutes, Klavzar's playing more minutes, between those guys in the backcourt, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, they were playing hot potato with the basketball, and it was moving around and really good ball movement and shooting with confidence, and there was a really nice flow to what they were doing offensively, and it just seems now a little herky jerky with Martin back in the lineup. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing against Martin as a player personally, but I think they've just struggled to get someone who, to be good offensively, has to be a little bit more ball dominant and dribble a little bit more to get him back involved without disrupting what they were doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, I think in getting to tomorrow night's game, again, another 8:30 game. Can we get off the SEC network? I mean, is that
No,
possible? For
no.
a top 5 ranked team, we've had more games on the SEC network. I mean, game day is there tomorrow, and we're on the SEC network, which is very interesting. Um, but I'll be very curious tomorrow for a couple of things to see how they respond to the loss, because again, they were told how great they were for the last 3 weeks, and then they lose, and Georgia fans storm the court, and it sucked, and then they've been to stew on that for a couple of days. You're playing an A&M team that, like I said earlier, has hit the iceberg. I mean, A&M was in the top 10 not all that long ago, and they've lost like 3 out of 4, I think. Vandy went in there and beat them on Tuesday or Wednesday. A&M is in desperate need of a win. So from that standpoint alone, they're kind of a dangerous team. How Florida responds to playing a dangerous team. You're at home, start seeing some balance in the rotation. Very curious tomorrow night, because if they win, Graham, if they win tomorrow night, then all's right with the world, and they got a gigantic game Wednesday in Tuscaloosa. If they lose tomorrow night, the conversation's going to start changing a little bit to, did they peak too soon, and are they leaking water heading into March?
Yeah, I would agree. I think you could argue it's the most important game of the year in terms of narrative of who they are. Like you just said, like in terms of what how how people feel about them nationally, maybe how they feel about themselves, because they have carried themselves like a team that can cut the nets down in April the last couple of weeks. And I think that swagger and that edge and that confidence has showed up on the court in a good way. They have one stinker. They don't play well against Georgia and they lose. And to your point, that they have not lost back-to-back games all year. Every game so far that they have lost, they've responded with one of their best games of the season afterwards. So that's what I'm looking for, Hack. How are they going to respond, like you said? And is it going to be the way they've responded typically when they've lost this year, which is come back and play in dominating fashion and just murder somebody? And if they do that, and then the Alabama game is Tuesday after that, right?
Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have a lot to talk about next week on Gator Bytes. But yeah, you win that, and then you have one of the games of the year in college basketball that Wednesday, and you see what happens in Tuscaloosa. But yeah, to your point, if they lose, then all of a sudden the Alabama game becomes almost a must-win. And I think they're actually going to win that game in Tuscaloosa. But regardless, I don't want at Tuscaloosa to have to be a must-win.
Southeast Orthopedic Specialist brings you Gator Bytes every week here on the 1010XL.com podcast network and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page for the highest quality care. You can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any orthopedic injury or concern. They have locations in both Jacksonville and St. Augustine. You can check them out Riverside, Northside, the South Side, the beaches, and St. John's. And again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for their continued support of the Gator Bytes podcast. As we begin to wrap up, interesting week for basketball with A&M and with Alabama. Then you end with Ole Miss. I think all three are quad one opportunities. That's the lingo now in the last couple of years. Quad one. Where Florida is affected is they're 19-0 in quads 2 through 4, meaning decent competition, but not elite. They're only 5-4 in their 9 games against quad one opponents. And the committee takes that stuff into account. So look, if you beat A&M and you beat Alabama and you beat Ole Miss, yeah. But if you lose 2 out of these 3, or heaven forbid all 3 of them, well, then all of a sudden you might not even be a 2 seed at that point. You might be a 3 seed at that point. So Florida needs, I mean, look, they have wins over 2 number 1 teams in America. I'm not saying they don't have a good resume. But if you look at Auburn, Duke, even Bama, Florida, Tennessee, you look at their quad one results, Florida is kind of lacking in that department compared to the other good teams nationally.
I agree with you. They also have the best win of anyone.
Yes.
One singular win. So I think those 2 things kind of balance out a bit. And if they can beat Bama at Bama, they'll have the best win and then probably like the 3rd or 4th best win at Alabama of that crew. So
I'm surprised you're that confident. That's going to be a hornet's nest, man. Can you really go into Auburn and Alabama, 2 top 5 ranked teams on the road, and win both games? That would, to me, that's a tall order next Wednesday in Tuscaloosa.
if Auburn was a tall order, they went in and kicked their ass.
You're right. They did. They absolutely did. Yeah, look, I think they beat A&M. They better beat A&M. Ole Miss is another team that's kind of fallen back down to planet Earth pretty drastically. They were pretty good a couple weeks ago. Ole Miss is kind of struggling now as well. So
And
I
that
think
game,
Florida wins those 2. I got serious doubts about the Alabama game.
well, I got serious doubts about you, Hack.
As far as what?
As far as your belief in Florida Gator basketball.
Well, again, not to pat myself on the back. What did I say last Friday?
I know, and they were.
I said one of those 2, LSU or Georgia, they were going to have a stinker. They were down 9 in the second half against LSU, and LSU decided to stop scoring, and Florida obviously blew them out. And I know I got a little bit of grief on social media about that. Thank you, by the way, for that video, that GIF you sent. That was entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But then I kind of got the Georgia thing right. I mean, they were due. I think they beat A&M. I think they beat Ole Miss. To think you're going to go into Auburn and win, and then a couple weeks later go into Alabama and win, and it's what's going to be a huge game next Wednesday. We'll see. I guess I'm not as confident as you. I don't think it's impossible, but I'm certainly not as confident as you are in it.
Gators going to win. Walter Clayton Jr. historically has torched this Alabama team, and I think he's going to do it again. Walter Clayton Jr. is due for a great game after he played Hack in my opinion. And to me, I know we were talking about like the refs and all that earlier. To me, the main reason they lost, Walter Clayton Jr. played one of his worst games he has in a Gator uniform. I know he scored 18 points, so the stat sheet won't look too bad. But he had some terrible, terrible, careless turnovers in pivotal moments in that game, and he looked disinterested defensively. He's Walter Clayton he's kind of a hit or miss defender, and he's never going to be, what Elijah Martin is as a defender, or one of the better on ball defenders in the country. He's never going to be that, but normally he's a good enough athlete, and he's engaged enough to at least be fine on that end, to not be someone that's getting hunted, not be someone that's just a liability on that side. And then he's so good offensively, he's he's still the best player on the team. But there are games every now and again where defensively, for whatever reason, he just doesn't have it. And to your free throw point that you made, Walter Clayton couldn't buy a free throw on Tuesday either. And you can tell with Walt specifically, and I think this translates to the rest of the team oftentimes, you can tell when their focus is not entirely there because it shows up on the free throw line.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Games that they are focused and they're playing well and they're locked in and they got confidence and they're doing their thing, and that, which is most games, that's 95% of games they play in. They're a good free throw shooting team for the most part. But then you'll have these weird games like, remember at Rupp, their first loss of the season when they played Kentucky. Walter Clayton, pivotal moment late in the game, misses he never misses 2 free throws at the line. If he misses 2 free throws, something's off. And you could tell that whole game their focus was just, if their focus needed to, because Georgia's not that good, their focus honestly only needed to be probably at like a 7 or 8 to win that game, but their focus was at like a 3. It was not a good outing. And I think that it might be the glass half full approach, but I think that game is going to be just the right kick in the ass they needed to go on a big run these next 3 games and then go have a really nice run in March.
Well, we'll see. It starts tomorrow night. So you like them to beat A&M and Alabama. I like them to beat A&M, probably not against Alabama. Quickly, through the magic of technology, I'll be doing the Duval Rundown podcast on a lot of these same platforms here in the next 15 minutes.
Yes,
so
sir.
let's end with this. Cam Jackson, Shamar James, yesterday at the Combine, by all indications, 2 pretty good workouts for both guys.
They're going to be good NFL players, man.
I think so.
I really like Cam Jackson because I think Cam Jackson's going to be a later round, not later round guy, but like a mid-round guy.
Did you see his weight? He had dropped like 30, 35 pounds. People were really happy about his weight going into the Combine.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he was like 360 at times at Florida. I think he weighed in at like 325, but it was a good 325. He got commended for that by a lot of scouts.
He's going to be one of those guys, I think, Hack, that shows up. You know, he's going to show up to somebody's campus, a 3rd or a 4th round pick, something like that. That's about where he's projected to go, right? Between like 3 and 5.
Yeah.
He's going to get picked somewhere in there and end up being an extremely reliable player that may even start for that team.
You know who he'll be? He'll be Daryl Slayton. Daryl Slayton was a decent player at Florida. He's a much better pro than he was at Florida. Slayton's been a beast for Green Bay. I think Cam Jackson might have the same type deal.
Yeah, I agree.
So, and then Shamar James also with a good workout. So we'll see a lot of Gators at the Combine. That continues up in Indianapolis. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for bringing you Gator Bytes right here on 1010XL.com's podcast network and on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.